Hi, and welcome to Matt Harmon Talks Mental Health, the podcast where I have the opportunity to sit down and chat to amazing humans about their journeys and their stories with mental health. For this episode, I'm so happy to introduce Andrew Smith to the conversation. Welcome, Andrew.
Hi, Matt. Good to be here.
Excellent. Great to have you. As always, just a brief introduction how we got to this conversation. I'll let you do a proper introduction to yourself, tell people about what you are and who you are and what you do. But we got together through LinkedIn. It seems to be a common connection for a lot of these conversations to start, both sort of working in similar areas. So the conversation sort of flowed, and then decided it might be a good opportunity to sit down and talk a little bit about the journeys with mental health. So here we are. Andrew, you can do a proper introduction to yourself, tell people a little bit about who you are, what you do.
Perfect, thanks. From a professional perspective, my journey with mental health has been relatively sort of short, you could say. Over the last 2.5 years, I've been working in occupational health, looking at the preventative side within sort of companies and employees, trying to reduce the risk of sort of all illnesses, diseases, whether it's physical or mental. And actually, through that, did my mental health first aid qualification and instructor qualification to deliver that course within sort of what we do, educating a lot around the awareness. And I think, particularly when I talk about my story, it's fairly large on sort of the stigma side of things, and it's very important to me. So it works very well with sort of the awareness we do within my role. On a personal level, I give her a shout out on everything else that I'll do now to my little baby girl that's 8.5 months old, which is added a whole side to mental health and mental well-being, and a whirlwind of emotions that come with that. Being a sports person, which links in a lot to why I'm interested in what I do, also led to a lot of naivety, particularly within mental health, and sort of only viewing the physical side as our health and well-being. So it's got a lot of a personal side to why I'm really trying to increase that awareness as a whole, really.
Excellent. So quite a few areas that we might explore in here as well then. So obviously the work that you're doing, the family side, and your experiences within the sports community as well. But I always just throw a big question at my guests here. I just ask them a simple thing, which is not a simple thing really, your journey with mental health, because there's reasons why you're passionate about these subjects. There's things that you alluded to in the beginning there, which is things that you talk about. So tell us a story, let us know more about who you are and sort of your journey.
Yeah, I think two key things that underpin my journey, and I think are fairly common. One is that stigma side of things, and two is peaks and troughs. With that, it started actually fairly early for myself. Now we'd know it as anxiety. At the time, I don't even know what I would know it as. I'd know it as embarrassment, worries, an increased heart rate, and pills that I took to decrease that heart rate when I needed it, essentially. I was about 12 or 13, and in a biology lesson at school, couldn't tell you what we were covering now, but started to feel quite queasy and faint and lightheaded. Put my hand up, asked to leave. I think may have gone home, etc. that day. Thought it was just a sort of a one-off occasion, and it wasn't until the next lesson when it was time to go, and I almost froze that morning when I knew I had biology and thought, I can't go in today. I can't go and do this topic. A lot of that was probably embarrassment. Who wants to be the kid that faints or passes out from biology and the human body, etc. around things, because it had, I think, spread within school, not in a necessarily negative way, but that kid that did feel dizzy or faint in that class. I don't think people made the link to why at first, just because it can happen to anyone. But in my head, if it was to happen again, we're going to then start to make the link. Then you can't do this, you can't do that. So I didn't go to that lesson. Didn't go in that day. Felt sick. Told my mum I felt sick that day. That's where a lot of the stigma and worries, I think, around it started. I couldn't say why. It was actually, blame it on the physical, which is from my perspective of things a lot of the case. It's always easier to talk about the physical than it is the mental with things. And it was actually arranged that I would then do my biology lessons in the corridor from the textbook. from then on, I'd have a desk outside and I'd do it out there. Which is where I think actually, unfortunately, problems started. Because then I learned avoidance. And from an anxiety perspective, I don't know how much people sort of know, but one of the best things we can do for anxiety is try and face those worries, because the perceived threats and the perceived worries are much worse than sort of the reality. So that started, but then there started to be other lessons that there'd be worries about. I remember one distinctly because it sounds so silly now with things, but geography. In geography at one point, we were covering, I think, sort of drugs and sort of drug mules and the use of in poorer countries and things like that. And I was worried there was going to be topics around needles, etc., coming up within that category. So then I couldn't go in because there was going to be that, and I'd have days off. I'd make not physically, but consciously, subconsciously, I'd make myself ill. I remember being at the bus stop one day and being physically sick from worry and having the day off from that side of things. Thankfully, I think my parents started to notice, obviously, this one, right? And we did go to the GP, and that's where I was given these pills, as I say, that were beta blockers, actually, but nothing explained to me about mental health. And again, like I say, whether it was he's too young, he's only 12, he won't understand, or whether my mum was told something and didn't relay it, whether GP, acting more on the physical, because of course, there's other medication for anxiety. Beta blockers are just slowing the heart rate and taking away some of those palpitations and that worry, and told to take them on a day when I'd worry about a lesson. Started seeing a school counsellor. Okay. Again, stigma plays a massive role in that, because I told everyone I'd been randomly selected as one of the people to go and speak to this counsellor once a week. Oh, I don't know why I'm doing this. It's so silly. It's X, Y, and Z. Oh, wish I didn't have to do it, etc. Whereas actually it was me going to see the school counsellor once a week from that side of things. Liaised a bit more with the schools. I think I went to speak to teachers before lessons. What were we covering that day? Take away some of that worry. If I did need to sort of sit out, I would, etc. around things. I think the big turning point that rings a bell for that was a fake running away from home, where I think it was a Sunday when the anxiety was sort of really, really, really building up throughout my life, and ran across the fields. I think my brother ended up catching up with me. I was sort of broken down on the field, and he just ran my dad where to get me. I think that was the sort of real turning point with it, and it leads to what I think is one of the biggest supports for me, and that is other people, and actually allowing people to help me. At an early age, it was just that. At a later age, and I'll talk a little bit about that going forward, at a later age, I think it was actually by telling other people, it allowed me to then look after myself, because I wasn't spending the whole time trying to hide it from other people. I can say, I'm actually going to go and do this now. I'm going to go, whether it was for a run, I'm going to take this time out for myself because it's what I need for my mental health, rather than, oh, well, I can't go and do that because then it'll be obvious that I'm sort of struggling around things. And things did get better. I went through GCSEs, A levels, took A level biology, etc. All this stuff with no sort of worries, concerns, etc. Until university, when we had another sort of trough, as we call it. I think it's a wild time for a lot of people when you think about mental health, mental well-being. Alcohol certainly goes up, sleep goes down, etc. around things, lots of worries. And the anxiety actually developed more into being trapped, out of control, things out of my control, and not trapped in the conventional sense, but almost in my head sense, i.e. if I'm in a lecture and suddenly I have the urge to go to the toilet or feel faint or feel dizzy, I can't be that one person that stands up in front of 200 people, leaves, and has to go out, because then there'll be questions, there'll be why. Again, linking into that stigma side of things and that worry around it. Around that time, we had family holidays we had a skiing holiday that we had to cancel the flights, and my parents, bless them, drove all the way to France because I couldn't be on a plane where I was out of my control and trapped. Whereas actually, if my mum was driving the car, I could say, I'll pull over, etc. around things, from that perspective. Missing lectures. There was a an awful a system at my university where all lectures are recorded and stored online an hour after each lecture. Well, of course, for someone that's struggling with their anxiety and not wanting to face up to that, I could have a lie-in and watch the 9 a.m. lecture at 10 a.m. in my room on my laptop. I probably missed half of the lectures in my second year of university, I would say, due to those worries and fears around it. And again, the big help came from a breakdown occasion. I was due to go and see Les Mis in London, actually, and it got to about an hour before having to leave, and I broke down and I said, I can't go because I'll be trapped in there. I can't be the person that gets up in the middle of the show, has to leave. What if I'm not on an aisle? All these types of situations. And again, opened up about it. But that time there wasn't any support that came. Thankfully, I'd learned before, and actually, Headspace, which is a meditation mindfulness app for those that don't know, was a massive help at those times around it. But it was then, okay, I could do it. I didn't have to. I don't think sort of wireless headphones existed that much at this time. So it was the thought of, can I play my mindfulness tape at my uni house with other people to hear if they walk past my bedroom, and the worry around it. But by telling other people, I remember, I think I did it via a text, just to all my uni housemates at the time, just saying, look, this is what it is, and just admitting it to people, and was able to then actually look after sort of myself with it.
Yeah.
Got to a much better place for third year, thankfully, and sort of got back on track. Did get the degree, did manage to stay, and sort of those stuff I'm very grateful for. Still live with it. There's been no massive troughs, as we'd say. I have a fairly good hand on now. Still live with it, and I think it is tough for friends, families, fiance at time with things. I'm a difficult person to live with at times. I love routine. I hate change, etc. around things, which, with a newborn baby, is something that happens a lot. But yeah, with things, but of course there's positives as well, because we've needed that routine, and I feel like I've been good at that routine at points with baby, but then social occasions, worries around that, and there is still stigma. Thankfully, in my close group of friends, family, I do all sort of speak to around things, but I want to, as part of me helping myself, push myself doing things like this, talking to people, discussing it, getting out there, and increasing that awareness, because I know whenever I've seen speakers talk about things, it's made me realize how big the topic of mental health is and sort of needs to be. So a lot of stuff at the moment about personal growth, looking after myself on a daily basis. And I think the big thing for me now is well-being. Well-being, mental health, mental illness, all terms that sort of get thrown around. And what I mean by well-being is that day-to-day fluctuation. Yes, I'm low today, and that's okay. But what am I doing to change that? Because if I'm here too long, we're going to get to places we've been before and places we don't want to be. So recognizing that and helping other people to recognize that is where I'm at sort of at the moment. And I call it whole circle, because I don't think there's going to be a time when I'm going anxiety free, mainly because of what anxiety is and the nature of fight or flight and anxiety with that. But I'm whole circle in terms of, I feel like I know what I need to do, and as long as I'm doing it, we're in a sort of good place with it. And that's probably me as a whole, I would say.
Well, it's incredible, and I, thank you for sharing all of that, and sort of, throwing out there sort of your life journey with this, with this challenge of anxiety. And I think you're right. It's that recognition that it's not going to just disappear, and it's not just going to go away and never be present. There will be moments, but what I find fascinating in there, and we'll touch on these sort of couple of topics in there if that's okay, is the routine element of knowing what to do to improve it or to challenge some of those things. So that's, I think, what we'll touch on in a moment. But I do just want to go back, if that's okay, just to sort of that 12, 13 years old, what was the Do you know what the change was? Was there something that sort of made that thing? Biology obviously was something that, had triggered something, or that was where it started, or it seemed to. Did you have those feelings before that at any point? Do you remember having any of those feelings?
Yeah, and it actually stems even younger, that. And this is where I think the stigma and the embarrassment stems from massively. And it actually goes back to year 5,
Okay.
sex education,
Right. Okay.
where 20 minutes in, woke up on the floor with the nurse above me.
No.
Uh, yeah, I think, and there is, embarrassment, particularly at that age. Oh, you know, that's the boy who, do you know what I mean, passed out. I don't know what it was at the time. Around it, it's probably still stigma around it today. I probably still do have that little bit of a, am I blushing right now situation as I'm telling it. But nothing between, which is, it's a really interesting point that you say in terms of what the trigger is. I mean, now, injections and needles, I do them because of the things we spoke about, but it's certainly I tell the nurse now to put me on the bed just in case, yeah, rather than anything else, and I'll look away side of things. Nothing in between. Now I don't know whether year 8 biology, because blood seems to be the big one for me.
Okay.
I'm not quick practically, biology and things in life. I've dissected hearts and things like that, but my own imagination with blood and running away with itself. So I don't know whether year 8 biology gets a little bit more detailed in terms of cardiovascular system and how the body works. And I think also I can get myself worked up from the worry that I might feel dizzy again, might pass out. I never have never since that day. When I've been 10, 9 or 10, never have again. But I can certainly get myself worked up to those feelings, which I think could have been what potentially happened in that situation. Then suddenly, anxiety grabs a hold and thinks we can work with this as a fear going forwards. Ultimately as a protection, but yeah, not in a good way in my case. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I think that's quite interesting, isn't it? If we look at the current sort of educational systems, and not to break that down into any great depth, but you think about sort of some of the subject matter that's being talked about in classrooms for young people, especially in secondary education at the moment, there is conversations around things like suicide and self-harm, and and you do wonder sort of and that connects a little bit to your experience. I don't mean that you were talking about those subjects, but you think about that lesson when you were in year 5 triggering potentially something in biology, and how these can actually be quite challenging. So as parents, how were your parents in terms of supporting you in that? I know obviously there's some, they took you to the doctor and stuff, and I don't mean that they did a bad job, because most of us as parents, we got no idea, right? We just feel our way through it, think we're doing the best, and sometimes it's struggle. How did you find that sort of support?
Caring,
Yeah.
but not understanding. And I know they won't have an issue with me saying that, because I speak to them now. They at times do have the old-fashioned view on mental health, as I would say, sort of around things, and I try to do my part to educate and point things out and talk about things. Caring and always there, but now thinking back, there was probably an element of helplessness from their part.
Yeah.
What can we do? I remember, bribes of things came in at one point. I think my dad said to me at one point, we spoke about the geography thing and how geography may sound, oh, what would there have been worrying in geography around things? And I remember him saying, if you go in today and do geography, you can pick another day to have off school, a whole day. If you go in and do this, you can have the whole day. I don't think I went in. But that probably was that, we spoke about that avoidance side. I think that was probably him saying, well, actually, if he can do this, maybe he can think, oh God, yeah, actually we were learning about volcanoes today, rather than anything around it.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
I think a lot of worry with things from them. I try and think now as a parent, would I have those worries, etc., around things and etc. I think there was a lot of tears from my part of the time and worries, I think. So yeah, caring, I would say, but not necessarily understanding, which perhaps led to more of that stigma from my side of things, because I am the odd one out. That's not me saying that now. That's probably me saying that at the time. I'm the odd one out. I hadn't heard anything around mental health. I certainly hadn't heard anyone else that had anxiety around things.
No, not at all. And, and I think that what you're sharing is actually a common thing that happens, right, with the parents in particular. And I see that a lot now still. And and I think about my role as a parent, and obviously you're just venturing into that role with your little one. But we don't have the skills, we don't have the tools, we don't know what to do, and that's a risk, right, for us as parents, especially in this world we're in now. And and you were living through that years ago, when you went through it. So yeah, it's a challenge for many. I'm going to move it forward because I'm conscious of time and everything in this conversation. There's so many questions I would love to ask you as well. The moment that you took control, that's one that I'm always fascinated by, where you sort of go, look, I accept I'm never going to get rid of this thing, but I'm going to learn how to deal and control. And I know you mentioned headspace in there. You mentioned sort of having a bit of meditation and talking about it with community. When did that sort of really start to take effect, would you say?
I think it probably happened twice. I
Okay.
think, and the first time from fear, whether that's good reason or bad reason. But I think I was at a place at university where I was thinking I'm going to fail. I'm not going to get a degree out of this. I'm going to go to university for 3 years
Yeah.
and not get a degree because I'm not attending things. I'm missing out on lots of things. I don't know whether I'd call it sort of a negative coping strategy, but I probably was, drinking a little bit too much at the time, going to bed late, etc. around things. I think I just said, from my own perspective, enough is enough. And I remember, I faced that stigma full on. I think I was getting into bed at uni at, 9:30, 10 o'clock some nights, which, for some people now is perfectly respectable bedtime. I'm probably earlier than that now. But certainly there, it was, what film are we watching tonight? How much PlayStation are we playing tonight? Till early hours. And I was actually going on, I'm going to bed, or I'm not going on that night out, and sort of tackling that head. And I think that was the big one sort of then. And then the second time was, I think, as I gained understanding, because I left uni, as I said before, I went into professional football as a sports scientist, and it was then sort of my role to look after the health and well-being of young individuals. Because I was within the academy, so it was sort of 18s down. My age was actually the under 9s to 16s. And I think then a little bit of it resonated with me. What can I do to support these people the best? And I actually use a slogan now for other people that say, I haven't got time for myself because I have all these other people to look after. And it's, how can you look after other people if you're not 100% yourself? And we speak a lot with mental health, physical health, productivity drops, all these types of things. I'm not 100% productive for, now caring for, my fiance and daughter if I'm not feeling right. And I know that there's times when, I do have to apologize at the end of the day, saying, I haven't been there as much for things because, mental well-being hasn't been right sort of on the day. Naively, that was probably mainly physical. Thankfully, I think the physical was helping the mental side for me and people. I think I never realized all the mental health support I had and all the things I did until I started educating people on mental health.
Right. Okay.
It was there, and I was doing, the headspace there. I've literally just had the thought now. I was doing headspace at, probably when it first came out when I was sort of 15, 16. But I never thought, oh, this is my mental health.
Right.
It was just an app that I used.
Yeah.
It was an app that I used to help with the emotions I was going through. So that's where it sort of then built upon what I'm doing. And that's my sort of mental health journey over the last 2.5 years, educating people and then going, okay, actually, I've just said that. When's the last time you did it? Are you doing it for yourself? Are you looking after yourself? And that's sort of really useful within what I do and what I enjoy that I do, because, within football, it was practice what you preach. I couldn't talk about nutrition to academy footballers and then go in the canteen and have sort of 4 or 5 chocolate bars. I had to be seen to sort of do the same thing. And I sort of apply that now
Yeah.
to everyday life, which I think is useful. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's so critical, isn't it? The sort of we talk about it, but we got to try and live and breathe some of what we're saying, because you feel it's a bit hypocritical if you sort of just say, eat healthily, drink less alcohol, go for a run regularly or activities, and then you don't do it yourself. It's one of the reasons why, I'm quite proud of showing off that I look after myself as best as I can for a 48-year-old man, but it is, something that I think is the change when you start to connect all of it to mental health. And I don't know if you're there in that space. I think you might be, but
But it took time. It took time to put the two together. Physical health, mental health, and as a as a kid, all I wanted to do was work on my own health and well-being, but it was work on the physical stuff. How physically fit am I? How well am I sleeping? Am I eating the right stuff? Which, fortunately, inadvertently, of course, now I see that massively kept me as particularly at the high points, a strong individual from a mental health and mental well-being perspective. But it wasn't until I started educating on whole health and well-being that I went, right, health and well-being, and under that, next to each other, come physical and mental.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, by definition, well-being is the connection of physical and mental health, right? So, it's fascinating. So what do you do now? So you said about routine. I just want to touch on that. What do you do now to maintain or try to improve your mental health? So when things aren't going quite so well, when the anxiety sort of creeps in a bit, what's your go-to? What do you do?
Yeah. So probably got three. My first one is scheduling. I try to do it as regularly as I can, but a screen-free day.
Okay.
With everything, which is difficult when I pick a weekend and the football's on. But I do adhere to it for those reasons. Screen free day. I do a lot on the media and news, etc. Controversial could be, I actually don't watch the news anymore.
Well,
I think if there's something that is dramatic, I will get told it from a friend, a family member, or something like that. But big on sort of social media and those other things, and avoiding what we call not the fake life, but only people's good bits, I
yeah.
think is what you see on social media.
Filtered,
I'm not going to
filtered
put on
world.
social media. Yeah. Hopefully I may at some point. I'm not going to put on social media the bad day I'm having. I want to get to a place where we can be more like that. But I'm going to put the amazing holiday that I might have saved up for 2 years for, that people then think, oh, look at him, he does this all the time, etc. around things. That one. My mindfulness, because it's not a routine at the moment. I'm trying to make it a routine. I'm doing a lot of personal habit change stuff at the moment and connecting them to things, i.e., just before lunch, just after lunch, when you're brushing your teeth, when you wake up. I'm trying to connect it to habits that already exist to bring those things in. I'm trying to do that with mindfulness around that. And then physical activity is my last one. And I don't want people to think I'm saying physical activity is what you have to do for mental health. I'm a big believer in self-care is individualized. And for some people, physical activity is great. It's proven, of course, to be very effective for our mental well-being, but isn't for everyone. I think in lockdown, running a 5K became the big thing, and to do exercise, you had to run 5K. Things I do a 10-minute walk after lunch. As soon as I finish lunch, wherever I'm going to go and do a 10-minute walk, get outside, get the vitamin D in, and just enjoy those endorphins that we all know comes with sort of exercise. So those would be sort of my three there. Screen-free day, going back to my mindfulness,
Yeah.
and disclaimer that I always point to everyone every time I say mindfulness doesn't have to be sitting on the floor cross-legged, hands like this for 2 hours. Of course it can be, but mindfulness is just that present moment side of things,
Being in
and
that moment.
engaging with it,
Absolutely. Yeah.
which links in massively with my screen days,
Yeah.
and not getting lost, and then physical activity to finish for me.
Yeah, brilliant. And I totally endorse and think about those all as being really positive movements towards mental health. And with your little girl, there's going to be the park visits. There's going to be plenty of outdoor time for you as well. So those are treasured days. Those are treasured moments, definitely. So incredible. Thank you so much for sharing all of that and your insights and your thoughts. We'll close this conversation in a moment, but I'd just like to throw it over for any thoughts or final things you want to share, any motivations or quotes that you love through life. Any final thoughts from you, Andrew?
Yeah. No, I did have a sneaky preparation from this from watching a few of the pods before. There's a book that I have read numerous times, actually, called The Anxiety Journal. And there's a really nice piece I like in there that sort of underpins what I would call my journey with mental health. And it talks around what's known as the barefoot doctors in China. And they're individuals that are actually paid to keep people well, not paid when people are ill. And in Western society, a lot of money is invested into individuals, all of their health and well-being when they're ill, and a very minute amount actually invested into keeping them well. So I think that's a sort of a key take home, particularly when we think about, both within our roles, but also, externally and outside of the workplace, the benefit of keeping people well rather than the costs that come from getting them back sort of on their feet in any aspect is is sort of massive. So that would be sort of my take home.
Brilliant. No, I love that. And I think that's what we're all trying to engage, isn't it? In this world that we work in and we're living in, we're trying to help people to prevent the issues from becoming much bigger. One of the big parts of mental health first aid is about helping to prevent the issues from becoming more serious, before professional help arrives. And it, not saying it arrives quickly, unfortunately, because we know the truth, but this is the challenge, isn't it? So I think that's brilliant. And listen, I just want to say a huge thank you for you sharing what you've shared about your journey and the experiences you've been through. Wish you all the best for the future, and looking after that little bundle of joy that you've got, and obviously your fiance as well, and taking care of each other and on those journeys, because when they're little, there's going on, but then they grow up and come and talk to me in 15 years time, and you'll be like, different conversation totally. But it's
a whole new set of worries, I'm sure.
Yeah, but you know what, enjoy right now. That whole thing about being in the moment, be in the moment with your little one as well. So, but that. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I wish you all the very best for the future, and I look forward to sort of following your journey and everything else. All right.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks for having me.
Take care.